Derinkuyu, a city that vanished into the earth, in Turkey. It was built to hold 20,000 people. An ancient civilization built an entire world underground. They carved it from solid rock. They needed a refuge, a sanctuary. They faced some kind of desperate threat. The community chose to leave the sun behind. They retreated into the dark. It wasn't stone and soil like we think of it. It was more like a landscape of possibility. The ground wasn't an obstacle. It was a material. Long before humans, huge volcanic eruptions covered this whole area in a deep layer of ash. Over millions of years, that ash compressed into a rock. Tough, and that's the secret. It's firm, but not like granite. It's soft. You could carve it with a metal pick or even a hardened wooden tool, but it has this property. Once you carve into it, once you expose a new surface to the air, it starts to harden. It solidifies, so those builders, they weren't just digging holes. They were crafting a kind of living stone. Every wall they smoothed, every staircase, it would grow stronger over time. You can see this geological gift all across Cappadocia. In those surreal pillars, the fairy chimneys, wind and water sculpted those natural spires from the same soft tuff. It shows how malleable the material was. So when those first people looked out at a world that felt dangerous, they didn't look for trees to build with. They didn't look for stones to stack. They looked down. They realized their greatest shelter wasn't something they had to build from scratch. It was something they could reveal, something already in the earth. The land was an invitation, and Derinkuyu was the answer. We know people used Derinkuyu, but who were the first ones, and when did they start? That's a difficult question. The answer isn't a single date. It's more like a series of layers built up over thousands of years. You often hear it was early Christians, and that's true. They were there later, hiding from the Romans. But the physical evidence in the rock suggests something older. You have to think of the city as a kind of document. Each group that lived there wrote its own chapter right into the stone. Archaeologists read those chapters. They look at tool marks, door designs, things that were left behind. One major clue is carbon dating from the deepest parts. That material dates back to the Hittite Empire. That's over 3,000 years ago, so the first digging could have been around 2000 BCE. After the Hittites, others came. The Phrygians probably used it and made it bigger. Then, centuries later, maybe the Persians, and then, yes, the Byzantine Christians. They definitely used it. They built chapels, added those huge stone doors for defense. So what we see now is a collage. It's a palimpsest. That's an old parchment where they scraped off the writing to use it again, but you can still see traces of the old words underneath. Derinkuyu is like that, but in stone. Hittite work, then Phrygian changes, then Byzantine additions on top. Because of that layering, you can't give the city one birthday. Its origin is a process. It happened across ages, and that changes what Derinkuyu is. It's not just a hideout. It becomes a shared human project, a secret kept and expanded by completely different cultures over generations. They all had different fears, different threats, but they all came to the same answer. They all looked down into that soft rock, and they decided to keep digging. To understand Derinkuyu, you have to go down into it, to walk through it. So we go down into the plan of the place. This wasn't just some random caves. It was a vertical city planned out, carved from the rock. Think of a skyscraper but built downward, going deep into the earth. They've mapped at least 8 levels so far. Going down more than 85 meters, that's deeper than a lot of apartment buildings are tall, and every level had a job, a zone. The upper levels were for living. The residential quarters, thousands of them, small rooms for families with beds and shelves cut right into the stone. Then the communal areas, big kitchens, ceilings black from fire with grinding stones and ovens. They had places for making wine from grapes and oil from olives for supplies. They had stables for animals with rings carved into the floor to tie them, and ventilation to take the smell away from where people lived. Further down, you'd find the center of things, a church, spacious, shaped like a cross for worship, with columns holding up the ceiling, and there's evidence of a school, too. A room for religious teaching. The design was all about function and security, a network of narrow corridors like a maze to slow down anyone coming in. The staircases were tight, and they could be sealed with these huge stone doors shaped like wheels, and through all of this, the ventilation system. Over 50 shafts going up to the surface, bringing air down to the deepest rooms, taking smoke away. That intelligence meant life could go on, not just hiding. A society, worship, school, making food, keeping animals. It could all keep going underground. This wasn't a short-term hideout. It was a whole world. A self-contained world. It shows a grasp of living underground, of planning a community that seems incredibly advanced. Even now, a city needs rooms, but it needs more than that. It needs a heartbeat, it needs to breathe, so you have 20,000 people sealed in a stone box 85 meters down. How do you keep them alive? The answer is in two systems, air and water. Without them, it's a tomb. With them, it's a fortress, something that can endure. The ventilation was a masterpiece. Passive engineering, over 50 shafts carved straight down from the surface, connecting to every major level. They weren't just holes, they were placed precisely. They used a natural principle: warm air rises. The heat from thousands of bodies, from cooking fires, from lamps, that heat creates a convection current. The hot, stale air rises up and out through certain shafts, and as it rises, it pulls cool, fresh air down from other shafts, from the surface, that creates a constant, gentle breeze. Through the whole complex, it keeps the air from going stale. It carries away smoke from kitchens, from workshops. You could have a fire burning on the 7th level, and the people on the 1st level wouldn't suffocate. These were the city's lungs, working silently, but then there's thirst. A well on the surface, an enemy poisons it, blocks it, so the engineers went deeper. They carved massive, protected wells, plunging straight down through the rock, past the living quarters, all the way to the water table, the natural underground water. That's a self-contained supply, renewable, safe from surface contamination, from drought, from any army up above. And the design was defensive. The ventilation shafts were narrow, could be sealed from inside if needed. The wells were deep within the secured areas, so life support becomes a strategic asset. An invading force camps on the surface for months, and the people below still have fresh air. Clean water, they can outlast a siege. This wasn't just survival, it was about control. It meant the community held all the cards. They could choose when to engage with the world above. Entirely on their own terms, the earth gave them shelter, but their own ingenuity gave them time. And time in a conflict, that's the most powerful weapon. All that ingenuity, the air shafts, the deep wells, it wouldn't matter if someone could just walk in. But the city's real genius shows up in its last line of defense. The doors, these aren't wooden gates or iron bars. They're something much more serious, huge circular slabs of stone. Each one weighs about half a ton. They look like giant millstones carved from the same soft rock as the walls, and they were made to roll. Imagine a narrow corridor just wide enough for one person. At the end, there's a slot cut into the floor and the ceiling. From a recess in the wall, one person could lever one of these giant stone discs out. They'd guide it, rolling it on its edge until it slid right into that groove. One final shove, and it drops into place. The passage is sealed completely. It was a simple mechanism, brilliant, a barrier almost impossible to break down from the other side. You couldn't burn it, you couldn't chip through it easily, not with hand tools. An attacking force crowded into a dark, narrow tunnel would just face a solid wall of rock. They'd be trapped in a kill zone, vulnerable to defenders shooting from small holes in the ceiling above. But these doors were more than just physical blocks. They were a psychological statement. Each one was a choice, a deliberate cutting of a connection. When that stone rumbled into its slot, it wasn't just blocking a hallway. It was the community choosing to turn inward, to rely on the world they'd built below, and to reject the chaos of the world above. The sound of it settling into place, that must have been a profound sound. A final sound, the sound of safety being won, but at the cost of the sun. They're the ultimate symbol of what Derinkuyu was for. This wasn't a city that hoped to negotiate. It was a sanctuary designed from its very bones to close itself off, to become an island in the stone. And in that silent, rolling closure, you hear the echo of a people who believed their greatest strength wasn't in fighting for the surface. It was in mastering the dark. A city is more than walls, it's a living thing. It needs food, light, work, and the evidence shows Derinkuyu's planners thought of all that. They built an economy in the dark, a hidden engine designed to run for months, maybe years, without any contact outside. That's where a refuge becomes something more. It becomes a home. Start with light. No sunlight reached that deep, so they used oil lamps, thousands of them, small clay dishes filled with olive oil, a wick floating. The ceilings in the main corridors are still black with soot from centuries of these tiny flames. But this wasn't just light, it was a calculation. They needed to store enough oil to keep the lamps burning. That meant cultivating olive trees up top, pressing the olives, storing vast quantities of oil in carved stone pits below. Light was a resource to be managed like water. Then food. They couldn't bring everything down, so they brought the means of production. Archaeologists found large, rounded chambers with carved troughs and channels in the floor. Those are wine presses, grapes crushed here, the juice flowing into pits to ferment. Other rooms have circular depressions with a central hole, for pressing olives for that lamp oil, or maybe for grinding grain. And the grain itself was stored in massive, bottle-shaped silos carved deep into the floor, sealed against rodents. They stored the harvest, processed it, turned it into staples, all inside the city. But maybe the most telling spaces are the stables, entire levels for livestock, stone rings in the floor where animals were tethered. They brought cattle, sheep, goats, donkeys down. This served multiple purposes. The animals provided milk, eventually meat, their manure for fertilizer or for fuel, and critically, their body heat. In the deep, cool stone, the warmth from hundreds of animals would have raised the temperature in the living quarters above, a form of natural central heating. Everything had a purpose, nothing wasted. It paints a picture of a bustling, organized underground world, not a panicked crowd in a cave, a community at work. People pressing wine, milling grain, tending animals, teaching children by lamplight in the carved schoolroom. The corridors would have smelled of animals, of smoke, of fermenting grapes and bread. A full sensory life, a managed life. That level of preparation means they weren't reacting to a sudden crisis. They were executing a long-held plan, a societal blueprint for resilience. They knew a threat was coming, and they built a world to endure its arrival, not for days but for seasons. In doing that, they turned their greatest vulnerability, being trapped underground, into their greatest strength. They weren't just hiding from the world, they brought a functional, breathing piece of it down with them. That world of work and routine needed a heart. And the people of Derinkuyu carved one for themselves, deep in the stone. You go down to the lower levels and the spaces start to feel different. The corridors open up. The ceilings get higher, and you come into this room shaped like a cross, the main church, a cruciform chapel, with an altar carved right from the living rock, niches for icons, a baptismal font. It's not a hidden closet, it's a proper, spacious place of worship, and that tells you something about the people who built it. For them, survival wasn't just air and water and grain. It was about meaning, it was about faith. In a time of hardship when the world above might have been hostile, this underground church served a purpose. A spiritual anchor. You imagine the community gathering there in the flickering lamplight, the air cool and still, smelling of stone and oil. They're far from the sun, far from their familiar landscapes. In this confined space, surrounded by uncertainty, they come together for prayer, for ceremony, for the rituals that define them. This wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity for morale. It gave structure to the long, indistinguishable days. It offered hope, a sense of divine protection, a reason to endure the confinement. The social fabric of the community would have been woven tighter in that room through shared belief. The presence of this church and several smaller chapels throughout the complex is a strong clue pointing to a major phase of use by early Christians, likely during the Byzantine era when they faced conflict. But the idea is bigger than one group. It shows a universal impulse. When people retreat for safety, they don't leave their souls at the door. They bring their deepest beliefs with them. They carve them into the very walls of their refuge. In Derinkuyu, faith wasn't an abstract idea. It was architecture. It was part of the bedrock. This sacred space transformed the underground fortress from a mere shelter into consecrated ground. A place where they weren't just hiding from something, but preserving something they believed was worth protecting, even in the deepest dark. Derinkuyu had its own massive stone doors, but the story doesn't end there. You have to look beyond its walls to see the true scale of it. This city wasn't an isolated fortress. It was a single node in something much larger, a hidden geography, a network across Cappadocia. Over 200 underground settlements have been discovered. Some, like the city of Communal, are only about 9 kilometers away, and the distance between them isn't empty ground. It's bridged by these incredible hand-carved tunnels. Passageways wide enough for people to move through single file, connecting these subterranean worlds. The evidence is physical. Explorers have mapped tunnels stretching for kilometers, starting or ending at known city entrances. Not every link is fully verified. Some passages have collapsed, but the pattern is undeniable. This was planned infrastructure, which means the people of Derinkuyu weren't just sealing themselves in. They were maintaining lines of communication, lines of escape. If one city was discovered, its population could evacuate through these dark arteries to another. It suggests a regional defense strategy on a scale we rarely see. This wasn't just a town hiding from raiders. This was an entire society preparing its shadow self. A duplicate civilization built in the negative space beneath the world. The tunnels allowed for the movement of people, but also information, supplies. Coordinated warning, sentinels could pass messages between strongholds. The network turned individual refuges into a resilient system. If one point failed, the whole did not collapse. That level of coordination speaks to a shared, profound understanding of threat. The danger they feared wasn't fleeting, it was existential. The kind of threat that made building a backup world with its own hidden highways a rational priority. The earth beneath Cappadocia was hollowed out not for one community's survival, but for the continuity of a culture itself. The soft rock in Cappadocia was a solution. But the surface was the problem. Why go underground? Why choose that darkness? It starts with empires. This region was a crossroads for centuries. Crossroads bring trade. They also bring armies. The first real threat came from the east. The Achaemenid Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great, a military superpower. Their armies were vast. They were disciplined, they were always moving, securing borders, expanding influence. For a small community in Anatolia, seeing that force on the horizon wasn't an opportunity. It was a crisis. You couldn't fight them, you couldn't reason with them. Your choices were submission or flight or vanishing. The Persians had swift cavalry. Organized infantry, they could sweep through a valley, take all the food, take people for labor, leave almost nothing behind. In that context, a hidden city starts to make sense. A terrible sense. It wasn't a retreat, it was a strategic disappearance. When the dust clouds appeared, the whole population could melt into the ground. With their animals, with their grain, for weeks, for months, they could live a parallel life below, while the storm of empire passed over them, finding empty homes. Silent fields, survival by becoming a ghost. Those early phases of Derinkuyu, the deep layers, they might go back 3,000 years. They could be a direct response to that pressure. An architectural answer to a geopolitical question. How do you exist when you're in the path of a giant? You don't stand in the road, you build a door under it. And you close it behind you, but the Persian threat was just the first chapter. Centuries later, a new power arrived from the west, the Romans. Rome brought a different order. Roads, taxes, centralized law, but also relentless conflict. This region became a volatile frontier between Rome and its rivals, the Parthians, later the Sasanians. Constant border wars, punitive campaigns, rebellions put down with force. For local people, life was a cycle of instability. A Roman legion marching through its immediate impact on a village wasn't so different from a Persian one. They would take what they needed. Resistance was futile. Then the Roman Empire itself changed, splitting into East and West, and a new element entered the story. Christianity. When the Roman state, the Byzantine Empire, started persecuting Christians who followed different doctrines, the nature of the threat shifted. It wasn't just about grain and manpower anymore. It was about belief. Your faith could make you a target. The need for a refuge became more profound. You weren't just hiding from soldiers, you were hiding your identity, your worship, your way of life. Those beautifully carved churches deep in Derinkuyu, they speak to this era. They aren't just places of comfort, they're acts of defiance, preserving a banned practice in a secret, sacred space. So the story of why Derinkuyu was built, it's not a single reason. It's a layered one. Like the city itself, it began as a response to imperial conquest, a way to avoid being swept away by history's largest armies, and it evolved into a sanctuary for preserving culture and faith against a more targeted ideological pressure. In both cases, the people looked at the forces on the surface. They made the same calculation. They could not win that fight, so they chose not to fight it at all. They built a world where those forces simply could not reach. The stone also tells a later story, a different conflict, not fought with swords but with ideas. The Byzantine Empire adopted Christianity, but the need for hiding didn't end. In the 8th and 9th centuries, a war erupted inside the empire over religious images, the iconoclastic controversy. Iconoclasm means image breaking. The iconoclasts were the breakers. They believed creating images of holy figures was idolatry, a sin. They wanted all such images destroyed. Then the iconophiles, the lovers of icons. They saw these images as vital for worship, windows to the divine, especially for those who couldn't read. The emperors in Constantinople sided with the iconoclasts. For a long time, they issued decrees, ordered the destruction of icons across the empire. For communities that valued their icons, this wasn't just a theological debate. It was an assault. Their churches were stripped bare, their sacred art was smashed or painted over. To resist was to defy the emperor. So where could you go to practice your faith as you believed? You went underground. Derinkuyu, with its deep, hidden chapels, became a sanctuary again. Not from foreign armies this time, from the agents of their own empire. In those silent, lamplit chapels, they could keep their icons safe, conduct services in the old way without fear. You can see the evidence carved into the walls. Crosses, not just one but many, delicately incised into the soft tuff around doorways, in chapels, in living quarters. This wasn't casual graffiti, these were declarations. A quiet, permanent statement of identity and belief, etched into the bones of their refuge. This period changes the understanding of the city. It was no longer just a physical fortress against invasion. It became a cultural fortress, a strongbox for preserving a way of life, a set of beliefs under active threat of being erased from the world above. The community wasn't just hiding people. They were hiding their soul, their art, their rituals, their connection to the divine. In the cool, still air of those chambers, they kept a flame alive. A flame the winds of doctrine blowing across the empire sought to extinguish. This adds a layer of meaning to every carved cross, every soot-blackened chapel ceiling. Each mark is a whisper of defiance, a promise of continuity. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful act of preservation isn't building a monument in the open. It's carving a sanctuary in the secret dark. The fear of the iconoclasts faded, but the earth's shelter was remembered. Centuries passed, new storms gathered. In the 13th and 14th centuries, a force came from the eastern steppes, the Mongol Empire. Their armies were a whirlwind, speed and shock. They swept across Asia into Anatolia. For Cappadocia, Mongol riders on the horizon meant one thing: a wave of destruction. Cities were sacked, populations scattered. And in that chaos, the old answer came back: the hidden doors beneath the hills, Derinkuyu, the network of cities connected to it. That would have been the only possible sanctuary. Records from that time are sparse, but the logic of the place is clear. When the sky seemed to fall, the community could descend into the proven safety of the stone. And here the story turns subtly. By this time, the population was largely Turkish and Muslim. The Christian communities who carved the chapels were gone or changed, yet the city accepted them. Its purpose went beyond the faith of its builders. A Muslim family facing the same threat a Christian family faced centuries before would have made the same desperate climb. Down the same staircases, they would have rolled the same massive stone doors shut against the same kind of danger. The architecture was neutral. It served a universal need. Safety. This pattern repeated even into the modern era, the early 20th century, a period of upheaval. Population exchanges between Greece and Turkey. The city saw use again. Local Greek communities caught in that difficult transition are recorded using the underground chambers as temporary hideouts. For them, it was a fleeting return, an ancient strategy, a brief, dark chapter in a long story of displacement. This longevity from Hittites to 20th century Greeks, that's what makes Derinkuyu more than an archaeological site. It becomes a mirror, a single, constant answer devised by humanity across 3,000 years. The surface world changed beyond recognition. Empires rose and fell. Religions transformed. Technologies evolved, but the fundamental threat remained: the threat of violence, of being swept away by forces beyond your control. And so the deep city remained ready, its silent corridors, its air shafts, its wells. They waited, not for a specific enemy, but for the timeless recurrence of human conflict. It stands as a monument, not to war, but to the enduring will to outlast it, to choose the darkness below over the chaos above, generation after generation. In that choice, carved so deep into the earth, you see a continuity. Heartbreaking, a thread of fear, yes, but also a relentless thread of hope. The stubborn belief that somewhere, even if it's in the belly of the rock, a community can preserve itself. And wait for the storm to pass. Survival wasn't just supplies or shelter. It was the people living together. So 20,000 people had to organize a life in that permanent twilight. The air was cool and still. Light came from flickering oil lamps, casting long shadows on the curved walls. A low hum of activity echoed through the corridors. That was daily life in Derinkuyu, built on strict routine and deep social bonds. First, space had to be allocated. The city wasn't a free-for-all. The layout shows a clear social structure. The most desirable quarters were on the upper levels, closer to the surface, better ventilated. Those likely went to community leaders, elders, important craftmasters. Families were grouped together, probably by trade or kinship, in clusters of small rooms. A carpenter's family might live near a workshop area with stone benches. A textile worker's room might be closer to a space with loom anchors carved right into the floor. This zoning by function made sense. It reduced cross-traffic in the narrow passages. It created neighborhood-like units inside the greater maze. The rhythm of the day was dictated by necessity, by shared labor. At set times, people went to the communal kitchens. These weren't just for cooking, they were social hubs, the heartbeats of the underground world. In the warmth of the ovens, with the smell of baking bread, news was shared. Stories were told, children played underfoot while adults took turns grinding grain on the heavy stone querns. The work was constant, tending the animals in their stables, mucking out pens, collecting manure for fuel, hauling water from the deep wells in leather buckets. One team monitored the ventilation shafts, making sure no debris blocked the precious airflow. Another group was in charge of the food stores, carefully doling out grain and oil and dried legumes. According to a strict rationing system, there was no room for waste. No room for hoarding. The community's survival depended on equitable distribution, on absolute trust in that system. This required a powerful social contract. A hierarchy of management to enforce fairness, to resolve disputes. Respected elders or a council of leaders made the tough decisions. They allocated rations. They settled conflicts over space or resources. They organized work details. Their authority wasn't just about power, it was about preserving the whole. In that pressurized environment, a single selfish act could unravel everything. A family taking more than its share, a dispute turning violent. It could unravel the delicate social fabric that kept everyone alive. So order was maintained through a shared understanding. The understanding that your survival was linked to the survival of the person in the next chamber. This forged bonds of incredible strength. You relied on your neighbor not just for companionship but for your very life. You celebrated births in the dim light. You mourned losses together in the silent chapels. You shared the fear of the unknown world above. The psychological adaptation would have been profound. Humans aren't meant for perpetual underground life. The lack of sunlight, the constant artificial light, the confined spaces, all of it takes a toll. To cope, they clung fiercely to routine. To ritual, the daily prayers in the church, the shared meals, the familiar faces and tasks. These things created markers of time. They fought off the disorientation. The sense of being trapped in an endless stone-walled present. The community became more than a group of individuals. It became a single organism, breathing together in the dark. Each person a vital cell in a body whose only goal was to endure, to wait, and to one day, hopefully, walk back into the sun. The oil lamp gave light, but it was also a clock. A way to mark time and a wall against the darkness, a resource you had to count. In Derinkuyu, light was about survival. You can see the proof on the ceilings. These huge black stains of soot curving over the hallways and rooms, they're not accidental. That's the breath of thousands of lamps, burned over hundreds of years. It shows you where people lived, where they worked, where life was focused, deep in the stone. The lamps were just simple clay dishes, open. You'd pour in olive oil or sometimes animal fat if times were hard, and put a linen wick on the edge. A small, fragile flame, but it came at a cost. Every lamp that burned used up oxygen, air that had to come down the ventilation shafts, and the fuel, the oil or the fat, that was food. A calorie you could eat or you could burn for light, so they had to make hard choices. How many lamps could they light, and for how long, the soot tells you. The darkest, heaviest stains are in the shared spaces, the main kitchens where cooking never stopped, the chapels for worship and ceremony, the schoolroom for teaching. In these places, light was an investment. It kept the community going, it kept up morale, but in the living quarters, the soot is lighter, spread out. That means light was rationed there. A family might have one lamp for a few hours at night, for mending clothes, for talking, then they put it out. Sleep happened in total darkness. That created a rhythm we wouldn't recognize. The city didn't just go to sleep, it faded, section by section, as lamps were put out on a schedule. The common areas might stay lit a bit longer for a night watch or urgent work, but then they'd go dark too. Running this system meant they were organized. Someone managed the oil stores. Someone gave each family a ration every week or month, probably based on how many people were in it. There had to be strict rules against burning extra, because wasting light wasn't just wasteful. In that sealed place, it was dangerous. It used the shared air. It used up a reserve that might need to last for months. So the simple clay lamp becomes a symbol. Its flame was a small stand against the dark, but it was also a chain of dependence. On the olive trees above, harvested in secret, on rendering animal fat carefully, on the discipline of everyone to use this fragile thing wisely. In that flickering, soot-stained light, you see their life underground. A constant balance where every comfort, even light, was measured against the hard math of survival. The soot on the ceiling is one story, the ground is another. More difficult, with 20,000 people in a sealed stone world, the biggest threat wasn't an enemy outside. It was the daily reality of human waste. Sanitation was their greatest logistical challenge. A single mistake could have turned the fortress into a tomb, not from invasion, from illness. The evidence isn't obvious. Not like the chapels or the air shafts. They haven't found Roman-style latrines here. In Derinkuyu, the solution had to be simpler, drier, completely contained. The water from those deep wells was for drinking, for cooking, for survival. Not a drop could be spared to flush anything away, so they likely used deep, carved pits. In specific, isolated chambers, probably on the lowest levels, away from where people lived and cooked. Just simple holes in the floor, leading down into a natural crack or a dug-out cavity. To control smell and absorb liquid, they used what they had. Ash from the thousands of cooking fires was perfect. After each use, a person would scoop ash from a pile into the pit. The ash would cover the waste, dry it out, neutralize the smell, slow the germs, a practical solution, zero waste. The ash served a purpose twice, first for heat, then for sanitation. Other materials might have been used too, dried earth, straw. This system demanded absolute discipline, a rigorous routine. Specific individuals or families would have been assigned to manage it. To monitor the pits, to make sure they were properly covered, to oversee their sealing when full. The waste itself, over a very long time, would decompose in that dry, ash-rich environment. But the psychological dimension was immense. Living in close quarters, the community had to collectively agree to follow these protocols. There was no room for neglect. One person ignoring the rules risked contaminating the air they all breathed, or the water they all drank from. This constant, silent battle against disease required an understanding of communal health. They may not have known about bacteria, but they understood cause and effect. They knew foul smells and mess in a confined space led to sickness. Their entire survival strategy hinged on preventing that chain reaction. The management of waste, of air flow, of water purity, all of it was connected. It speaks to a level of social organization and mutual trust that is staggering. Every individual, from the youngest to the oldest, had to be a conscientious participant. Their lives literally depended on each other's compliance. In the quiet, ash-scented chambers of their sanitation system, you find the foundation of Derinkuyu's endurance. It wasn't built on heroics, it was built on the humble, daily discipline of keeping their world clean. Silence was as important as light, sound carried in that half-dark city. A shout, a child crying, something metal falling. It could travel up a vent to the surface. It could give them all away. So the first rule in Derinkuyu was quiet. A culture of whispers, careful movement. This wasn't just manners, it was survival. Keeping 20,000 people that quiet needed more than rules. It needed an agreement, an understanding that the group came first. There was no king's palace down there, no throne room. Order came from a council. Elders, skilled craftspeople, maybe military leaders. They would have met in one of the bigger central rooms, a room with benches cut into the walls. There, by lamplight, they made the choices that kept the city going. They divided the last of the grain. They settled arguments between families over space or noise. They set the work schedules for the well, the kitchens, the watch. Their power didn't come from force. Force was too risky underground. It came from necessity. From the clear, frightening knowledge that without cooperation, everyone would die. Getting those decisions out across 8 levels of tunnels was another problem. Runners, probably young and fast, knew the maze by heart. They carried quiet messages from the council to the wine press, to the stables, to the living quarters up top. But for emergencies, a door being forced above, sickness starting to spread, they needed something faster than a runner. They might have used the city's own structure. The air shafts. A guard at a hidden surface entrance could drop a pebble down a specific shaft. The sound of it clattering down would be a signal to the guards below. Or maybe they used ropes or water poured down a channel to send a silent alert through the stone. That network of quiet signals made the city work like one living thing. The rules themselves were simple, harsh, and known to all. No noise above a whisper in the outer halls. Light was rationed. No fire without a good reason. Waste had to be handled with ash at the right time and place. Every drop of water, every bit of grain was tracked. Moving between levels might have been limited to certain hours to avoid crowding. The punishment for breaking rules wasn't jail. There was no space for that. The worst penalty was probably exclusion, losing your share of food, or, in the worst cases, being locked out of a section. Left alone in the dark, that threat was so serious, so absolute, that it tied the community together in a web of watching, not from cruelty, but from shared fear. Your neighbor wasn't just your neighbor, they were your guarantee. Their obedience kept you safe. Your obedience kept them safe. That created a specific kind of pressure. A quiet, intense democracy of survival, where the worst crime wasn't theft or violence but carelessness, an act that could bring attention or waste something vital or start a panic. In that still, lamp-lit world, the social contract wasn't written on paper. It was written in the silent understanding between every person who breathed. They traded the chaos above for the order below, and that order, kept by whispers and watchful eyes, was the real wall that held the dark back. Derinkuyu was just forgotten for hundreds of years. Then, in 1963, a man was doing some home repairs. He was knocking down a wall, and his hammer went right through into a space, a big one. There was this cool air that came out, so he made the hole bigger, held up a light, and looked inside. It wasn't a small room, it was a tunnel, a long one going off into the dark. He'd found a doorway right there under his house that changed everything. People heard about it, officials came, and then archaeologists showed up. They started exploring. They went down with ropes and lanterns, first people in a very long time to be down there, and what they saw was a lot, rooms. More rooms, multiple floors, a whole city just sitting there in the dry air. The size of it was hard to understand. They saw kitchens with the grinding stones still there. They found chapels with crosses cut into the rock. They followed air shafts up to little spots of light. They mapped wells that went down deep. Every corner had something new. This wasn't a natural cave. It was built. It was engineering. Now the modern world was looking at it. Archaeologists brought their tools. They measured the wells. They looked at the soot on the ceilings to see what was burned. They studied the marks on the walls to see what tools made them. Each answer led to another question. Who built this part? When was this room added? How long could people live down here? Finding it wasn't the end. It was the start. It was about starting to listen to what the place itself was saying. Every step, every stain, every doorway was like a word. That hammer didn't just break a wall, it broke through time. And it let us ask the city something. We could finally ask what happened here. Mapping a city you can't see, it needs a different kind of vision. So the archaeologists in Derinkuyu, they don't just walk the known passages. They have to listen to the silence between the walls, ask the rock what it's hiding. Their tools become extensions of that curiosity, made to reveal, not to destroy. To understand a place built for secrecy, you have to become a detective of the deepest kind. One crucial tool is ground-penetrating radar. You have a machine that sends harmless radio waves down into the earth. These waves go through the soft tuff until they hit a change, a hollow space, a wall, a different density of rock. Then they bounce back to a receiver. The data makes a kind of echo map, a ghost image of what's behind the visible stone. It shows the outline of a blocked corridor, the shape of a chamber sealed for 1,000 years, all without swinging a pick. It tells them where to look, where to listen more closely. It turns guesswork into guided discovery. Then there's three-dimensional laser scanning. A technician sets up a tripod, a spinning laser in the center of a carved room. The laser fires millions of precise points across every surface, the walls, the ceiling, the uneven floor. In minutes, it captures the exact dimensions, the contours of the space. The result is a perfect digital twin, a model you can rotate on a screen, measure to the millimeter, explore from angles no human could ever reach. This is invaluable. It lets an archaeologist in a lab thousands of miles away examine the subtle tool marks on a doorway, study the angle of a chisel stroke, understand the technique of the artisan, see if a wall was carved in one period or patched in another. This digital preservation is a race against time, creating a permanent record of a site that, despite its endurance, is fragile. When physical excavation is necessary, it's a ballet of precision. They don't dig with shovels. They use dental picks, soft brushes, small trowels. They work inch by inch, documenting every speck of soil, every fragment of charcoal, every tiny seed. These organic finds are the city's calendar, a piece of charred wood from a cooking fire, a grape seed pressed into the floor of the winery. They can be carbon dated. This science measures the steady decay of radioactive carbon in once living material. It gives a date range. That piece of wood tells them someone had a fire in this room around, say, the year 800. That seed tells them the winery was in use during a certain century. By gathering hundreds of these tiny clues from different sealed levels, they can build a timeline. They can say this level was expanded by the Byzantines. This deeper tunnel shows Hittite tool marks. The work is achingly slow. A single season might be devoted to clearing one blocked ventilation shaft. Documenting one small storage room, there's a profound respect in this pace. They're not just extracting information, they're in conversation with the structure. A wrong move, a vibration in the wrong place, it could disturb the delicate equilibrium that's held the ceilings up for millennia. The soft tuff that made Derinkuyu possible also makes it vulnerable. Their mission is a balance, to gently pull back the veil of history while making sure the veil itself does not crumble. In this meticulous, quiet science, you see a modern reflection of the city's own builders. Both groups understood the material they worked with. Both operated with careful intention. The ancient engineers calculated load and airflow to create a living space. The modern archaeologists calculate pressure and resonance to preserve it. One group built a world in the dark. The other now seeks to understand that world by listening to the faintest echoes left within it. Every radar ping, every laser point, it's a question whispered into the stone, and sometimes, if they listen carefully enough, the stone whispers back. Derinkuyu is massive, but it's part of a pattern. People all over, under pressure, they'd go underground. Tunisia has the Matmata. These aren't cities. They're homes for a family, dug down into the earth, courtyards, rooms carved into the soft ground. It was about the heat escaping the Sahara. The construction is simple, it's architecture for the climate. A personal answer. Then there's Lalibela in Ethiopia, a spiritual project. In the 12th and 13th centuries, they carved 11 churches from solid rock. But they carved down, starting at the roof, chiseling downward to free the whole structure. This was about faith, not hiding. These churches were meant to be seen. Pilgrims were meant to visit. Their monuments in open pits. Its subtractive sculpture just enormous, but the goal was a visible holy city. And then Khu Khai in Vietnam. From the 20th century wars, a network of tight tunnels, small rooms, purely military, for moving unseen, for surprise, for temporary shelter. You had to crawl. They had kitchens, hospitals, but it was a functional warren for soldiers, not for living. It was built fast with whatever was around, out of necessity. Against these, Derinkuyu becomes clear. Its purpose was civilian survival, total survival, not for climate or religion or combat. It was built to preserve a whole community. Everyone for who knows how long that required a different plan. The Matmata houses a family, Lalibela serves a congregation, Khu Khai hides a regiment. But Derinkuyu was meant to be a town. Its 8 levels are like a vertical city. Homes, shops, storage, worship, all of it, integrated. The air shafts, the wells, they weren't extras. They were the basic utilities for an underground metropolis. That's what sets it apart. The evidence schools, wine presses, stables with places for waste. It shows a plan for normal life to continue. The builders weren't just thinking how to hide. They were thinking how to live and for how long. The answer was a self-contained world in stone. So when you look at all these underground spaces, Derinkuyu is different. Not just for its size or its doors, for its vision. It's probably the most complex pre-modern underground city ever found, because it wasn't a hideout or a shrine or a base. It was a parallel world, a complete society in waiting, carved with generations of work into the soft rock of the plateau. Derinkuyu is astonishing, but the truth gets wrapped in stories. One story says it was built by beings not from this world, that the precision is too great for ancient people. That idea misunderstands the evidence. The tool marks are right there on the walls. You can see them. They show patient work, chisels and picks. The rock was soft, tough. It was a cooperative material. It allowed for this carving with the technology they had. To say it was aliens dismisses the ingenuity of the people who lived here. Their achievement came from necessity. It was executed over generations. That deserves our wonder more than any myth. Then there's the scale. You might hear it connects to hundreds of other cities underground. Tunnels across Turkey. The reality is more measured. Archaeologists confirm several underground settlements in Cappadocia. A handful are linked by tunnels. Kaymakli, 9 kilometers away, is the famous one. These connections existed, but they were limited. Practical escape routes between neighboring strongholds. Not a highway system under the whole country. The evidence for vast continent-spanning tunnels isn't there. The real network was regional, a web of local sanctuaries. And that itself shows coordinated communal planning. The capacity, the figure of 20,000, that's a well-founded estimate, based on living space, storage, water. But that's a maximum emergency capacity, not a permanent population. Life at that number would have been cramped, stressful, hard on resources. the sustainable population for a long stay was probably much lower. The city was designed to hold people safely, but the experience would have been severe hardship, a testament to what a community will endure to survive. And the timeline, it wasn't built in one go by one civilization. It's an archaeological palimpsest. The Hittites may have started it, the Phrygians expanded it. Early Christians and Byzantine communities refined it, used it extensively. Then, centuries later, others sought shelter during the Mongol incursions. Even into the modern era, its story isn't a single chapter, it's a recurring theme. Each group left a subtle imprint in the stone, a signature of fear and resilience. Clearing away these myths doesn't diminish the mystery, it deepens it. You replace fantasy with a more profound reality. The real story isn't about alien technology or limitless hidden worlds. It's about human beings facing tangible, terrifying threats. They responded with patience, cooperation, practical, brilliant engineering. They looked at a soft plateau of volcanic rock and saw not just stone. They saw salvation. That's the true wonder, a wonder built not from fantasy but from the human will to endure. Derinkuyu's endurance is the real lesson. It didn't survive by accident, it was built to last. They had no steel, no concrete, no computer models. What they had was observation, trial and error. A deep, intuitive feel for the material they were working with. Their legacy isn't just a hidden city, it's a masterclass in resilient design. Principles we're only now, in our modern age, starting to fully appreciate. Trying to copy, look at the structure first. They carved through 8 levels of soft rock. The constant danger was collapse, so they used the rock itself. They left strategic pillars, thick columns of untouched tuff, standing at regular intervals as they hollowed out the rooms around them. These weren't afterthoughts. They were part of the original plan. The pillars distributed the weight of the ceiling above, channeling it down through the solid rock to the earth below. They understood load-bearing. They also used arches, not just for doorways but for ceilings. The curved arch is nature's perfect shape for distributing weight outward and downward. It's why Roman aqueducts stand. It's why Gothic cathedrals soar. In Derinkuyu, they carved these arches into the living rock, ceilings that could withstand immense pressure for millennia. This is passive structural engineering. They worked with the geology, not against it. Then there's the air. The passive ventilation system is a stroke of genius. They created a stack effect. Warm air from bodies and fires rises up specific shafts, pulling cool, fresh air down others. That requires a precise understanding of pressure differentials. Airflow paths, they placed the shafts to maximize this natural convection. It's a principle used today in modern sustainable architecture, buildings designed to breathe without mechanical systems. Derinkuyu's architects mastered it over 1,000 years ago. They also managed humidity. Deep underground condensation is a threat. It breeds mold. Ruins food, makes living conditions unbearable. The constant, gentle airflow prevented stagnant, moist air from pooling. It kept the environment dry and stable. This is environmental control through design, not technology. The water management is perhaps the most sophisticated lesson. They didn't just dig a well. They tapped into the aquifer, the natural underground water table. This is hydrogeology. They understood that water flows through porous rock. By digging deep enough, they could access a renewable, protected source. It was a closed-loop system. The water they used, in a sense, returned to the same cycle. They also designed the wells to be defensible, placing them deep within the secured complex. This integration of resource security with structural design is a cornerstone of modern disaster preparedness, off-grid sustainable living. So what does this ancient city teach us? It shows that resilience is built on integration. The builders didn't see structure, air, and water as separate problems. They were parts of a single system. A system that had to function in harmony for the whole to survive. Modern architects and engineers looking at sustainable design, at shelters for climate extremes or disaster zones, are drawing on these same principles. The value of passive systems that require no power, the wisdom of using local materials, understanding their properties completely, the necessity of designing for the long term. For true endurance, Derinkuyu stands as a powerful case study. It proves that some of the most advanced solutions aren't always the most complex. Sometimes they are the most elegantly simple. They emerge from a profound connection to place, a clear-eyed focus on survival. In those quiet, carved halls, we find a blueprint, not for hiding from the world, but for building within it more thoughtfully, more sustainably, with a resilience meant to last for ages. Derinkuyu isn't just for historians, it's in our imagination now. You see it in fantasy books, whole cities built underground. You see it in video games, those deep levels where you find lost things. In movies, it's the final bunker, the last safe place when everything above is gone. In these stories, it's never just a place, it's a symbol. It means hidden knowledge, something kept safe from the world outside. It means resilience, a whole community deciding to turn away from the surface and start over in the dark. It's about escape, but also about keeping something alive. These stories ask what the real place asks. What would we save if we had to leave the world behind? That fascination is everywhere. The idea of a world below us, it connects to old stories, the underworld, the secret refuge, the safe place we build from our fears. When people remake Derinkuyu in art, they're using that old library of fear and hope. They take the real things, the tunnels, the stone doors, the world that could sustain itself, and they make it a stage for modern fears. Fear of the environment breaking down, fear of being watched all the time, fear of losing who you are. In these versions, going underground isn't about hiding from the truth. It's a strategy. You pull back to protect a seed, a piece of truth, a way of life, a hope. That community in the dark, they aren't quitting. They're playing the longest game there is. So Derinkuyu becomes more than its own history. It stops being just an answer to ancient threats. It becomes an archetype, a real place built for a real need that turns into a container for the questions we have now. Its place in our art and stories proves how deeply its design resonates. We look at those carved rooms and we don't just see a shelter, we see a canvas. For our own stories about survival, about who we are, and about the will to make a space for a future, no matter how deep you need to dig to find it. Keeping a city made of soft volcanic rock intact is a constant race. The same conditions that allowed Derinkuyu to be built are now what endanger it. Moisture is the main problem. For hundreds of years, the city was in a perfect dry state. The air was still, the humidity never changed. But now, with hundreds of people walking through every day, that balance is broken. Just human breathing puts a lot of water vapor into the enclosed space. That change in humidity is a quiet, widespread danger. When moisture condenses on the old walls, it can soften the tough stone, causing a slow, crumbling erosion. Even a single touch can leave a mark because the oils from skin can speed up decay. And then there's the earthquake risk. Turkey is a very active seismic zone, and while the city has survived many tremors over thousands of years, one major quake could damage its structure. Preservation teams have to constantly watch for tiny cracks, shifts in the support pillars, any sign of movement. To fight these problems, there's a detailed conservation project happening. It's led by Turkish authorities with help from UNESCO, which lists the site as part of the Göreme National Park and Cappadocia's World Heritage Area. The strategy has many parts. Visitor access is tightly managed, paths are set, and the number of people inside at once is strictly limited to reduce the human impact on the environment. In important sections, there are subtle climate control systems working to keep temperature and humidity stable, countering the moisture brought in by tourists. They use advanced monitoring technology all through the complex. Sensors track humidity, temperature, even small vibrations in the rock. That data acts as an early warning, so conservators can react to changes before they cause harm. The work never ends. It's a continuous, quiet effort of maintenance, a conversation between the modern world and the ancient one. The final aim is a careful balance. To let people from everywhere see this amazing human achievement, while making sure their visit doesn't become what destroys it. Every step, from the limited tour groups to the hidden sensors, is an act of respect. It's a promise to the generations who carved this refuge, and to the future generations who should get to stand in its quiet chambers and feel that same wonder. This isn't just about saving stone. It's about protecting a deep chapter in the story of human endurance, making sure its whispers aren't lost to the air itself. We know the 8 levels, they're mapped, but the soft rock suggests there's more. Radar shows voids, structures, chambers continuing down past where the tours stop. So the question is, how many floors are still undiscovered? Some researchers think there could be several more, maybe 12 levels total, maybe even 15. Those would be the most secure areas, reserved for leadership or for the community's most vital treasures. Excavating that deep would be a massive operation. It could take generations, but the possibility is what fuels the imagination. It means the full scale of Derinkuyu is still a shadow, a shape we've only partly traced. Then there's the procedure. We understand the mechanics, the stone doors, the ventilation. But what was the human protocol when danger came? How did 20,000 people get the signal to descend? Was it a coded sound through the air shafts? Runners sent to every village, a watchfire on a distant hill being put out. And once they were inside, how was order kept during that influx? There had to have been a plan. A rehearsed plan, designated guides at every junction directing families to assigned sectors, a priority system for moving livestock down the narrow ramps. A chain of command for sealing each door, section by section, from the deepest level upward. The archaeological record shows no panic, no crushed belongings in doorways. No signs of violence in the corridors. That suggests this was a drill they had practiced, a societal choreography perfected over generations for the moment the sky filled with dust. Which leads to the most tantalizing mystery. What might still be hidden in the sealed chambers? The city was used for centuries, then it was deliberately abandoned. Forgotten. Did the final inhabitants leave anything behind? Not everyday tools, but things of value. Sacred text sealed in stone boxes, community records. Lists of lineages, treaties carved on metal, or caches meant to restart a civilization. Seeds of specific crops, samples of medicinal plants, master copies of essential knowledge. These wouldn't be randomly placed. They'd be in the deepest vaults. Places meant to be found only by those who knew the city's full layout. Modern scans can show the shape of a room, but they can't reveal what sits on a shelf in that darkness. The only way to know is to open a door, carefully, respectfully, a door that's been closed for a millennium. These open questions aren't failures, they're the engine. They remind us that a site like Derinkuyu isn't a puzzle to be solved and put away. It's a conversation. Each new technology lets us ask a better question. Improved radar, more sensitive humidity sensors, and sometimes the stone gives a new answer. A previously overlooked tool mark might reveal a forgotten construction technique. A new carbon date from a deeper layer might push the origin story back another 500 years. Every discovery like that can rewrite the narrative, shifting our understanding of their ingenuity, their timeline, the scale of their determination. The enduring mystery is what keeps Derinkuyu alive, not as a relic, but as a living question mark carved into the heart of the earth. Derinkuyu's logic didn't disappear, it just took another shape. We still build underground shelters now. Not for people, though, for the things we decide are most crucial to keep. The deepest impulse is the same, to make a space the surface can't reach. Think about data centers. The global network, a lot of them are built underground now, in old mines, in excavated bunkers. They're fortresses for information, thick concrete walls. Precisely controlled environments, protected from storms, from temperature shifts, from anyone looking. Inside, on rows of silent servers, we keep our collective memory. Our finances, our communications, our history, our art. It's a modern library of Alexandria, but we've buried it in the earth to keep it safe. The threat isn't a foreign army. It's digital decay, cyber conflict, or just a physical disaster. The response is architecturally familiar, though, an impervious, climate-controlled vault. Then there are the seed banks. The most famous one is in Svalbard, the global seed vault, carved into a mountain on a remote Arctic island. It's a deep freeze for the planet's agricultural future. Inside those long, cold tunnels, sealed in foil, are millions of seeds, duplicates of the world's crop diversity. It's a backup drive for life itself. Secured against any catastrophe that might hit the surface, war, climate change, the entrance is a stark, angular wedge coming out of the snow, a modern stone door. Guarding a treasure more essential than gold, this is Derinkuyu's pantry, scaled to the whole planet, projected centuries into the future. The community it serves is all of humanity. The siege it prepares for is ecological instability, and we can't forget the bunkers, the vast decommissioned command centers from the Cold War, built to withstand a nuclear exchange. Or the private, fortified shelters some build today. The architecture of fear persists. These are spaces designed for the ultimate retreat, for when the surface becomes uninhabitable. Their own air filtration, their own water and power, their own sealed doors, they are the direct descendants of the Cappadocian cities. The technology is different. Reinforced steel and Geiger counters instead of tough and oil lamps, but the human calculation is identical. It's the decision that the only path to continuity is to go down. To seal the hatch and wait for the storm to pass, these parallels force a reflection. They tell us the drive that carved Derinkuyu isn't a relic, it's a fundamental strand of our psychology. The nature of the threat evolves, from Mongol horsemen to intercontinental missiles, from religious persecution to data corruption, from local famine to global crop failure. But the strategic answer often echoes that ancient, downward glance. We still look to the earth for ultimate security. What does that say about us? Maybe it shows a sobering realism about the fragility of our surface civilizations, and maybe it also shows a stubborn, profound hope. Each buried server farm, each frozen seed, each reinforced shelter. It's a bet on a future, a declaration that something must be preserved, must endure, no matter what happens above. Future archaeologists millennia from now might find the concrete shells of our data centers, or the silent chambers of Svalbard. They'll study their placement, their construction, the artifacts inside, and they'll ask the same questions we ask of Derinkuyu. What were you so afraid of? And what did you love so much that you went to such lengths to hide it away? Our hidden architectures will be the clearest messages we leave. Stone letters spelling out our deepest fears and our most cherished hopes for continuity. The air changes when you step down from the sun. It gets cool. Damp, you smell stone and stillness. This is the threshold. The modern world fades. You're in a narrow, carved corridor going into the earth. You walk where 20,000 people once moved. The passage is tight, single file. Your shoulders almost brush the smooth, curving walls. Your voice drops to a whisper. It feels like a rule of the place. The only sound is the scuff of shoes on rock and the distant drip of water coming down through the stone from somewhere above. This isn't a museum behind glass. It's an immersion, a physical conversation with a space built for survival. The darkness isn't total. Electric lights now show the path, but they just make the shadows deeper in the side chambers and the shafts that drop away into blackness. Your eyes adjust. You see the wall texture, the chisel marks from tools millennia ago. You run a hand along it. It's not rough, it's surprisingly smooth. Polished by time and by countless hands that may have steadied themselves right here. The temperature is constant, a cool escape from the heat above. But you realize it would be a pervasive chill to live with, day after sunless day. Then the corridor opens. You enter the wine press room. The space is vast. High arched ceiling, in the center of the floor, a large circular depression with a channel carved to lead liquid away. You stop, the scale hits you. This wasn't a small family operation. This was industrial for a community. You can almost hear the crush of grapes, smell the fermenting juice, see the figures laboring here by the light of oil lamps, their shadows dancing on the walls. This room makes the idea of sustainability tangible. It was about more than hiding. It was about preserving the rituals of life, the harvest, the celebration. The taste of normalcy, deep in the heart of the rock. The awe shifts as you go deeper. You come to one of the stone doors. It sits recessed in the wall. A massive circular slab of tuff, thicker than your torso. A guide shows how it would have rolled. A groaning, final sound as it slid into its slot in the floor, sealing the passage. You stand in the corridor on the other side of that groove. You look up at the low ceiling above it. Small holes are carved there, defensive positions. In that moment, the history becomes visceral, claustrophobic. You are standing in the kill zone. The cool air feels heavier. You imagine the scene, the thunder of the stone settling into place. The last sliver of light from the other side, gone. Absolute darkness, silence, broken only by your own breath. And then, maybe, the scuff of an enemy's footfall on the other side of that immovable rock. The door isn't just an artifact. It's a monument to a terrible choice. The choice to sever your connection to the world, to trade the open sky for the security of absolute isolation. This walk is a journey through layers. You feel the communal buzz of the workrooms, the quiet of the chapels with crosses etched into walls, the organized bustle of the stables and storage pits. But under it all is that tension, the knowledge that every comfort, every routine existed inside a bubble of secrecy, that at any moment the order could have been given. And those massive wheels of stone would have rolled shut, one after another, turning this living city into a silent, impregnable vault. To walk these corridors is to feel the weight of that contingency. To understand that history isn't just dates and tools, it's the cool air on your skin, the narrowing of a passageway, and the profound, echoing silence left behind when a door closes for the last time. Those sealed doors, they stay with you long after you're back in the light. Derinkuyu isn't just an archaeological site. It's a story of resilience cut right into the stone. The origins are layered, mysterious. The engineering is sophisticated, breathtaking. It's a testament to the lengths a community will go to protect what matters. Their lives, their shared culture, their deepest faith. It's a monument to continuity, not conquest, to the stubborn will to endure, to carve out a space for tomorrow. No matter how deep you have to go to find it, you come out of that place with something, an appreciation for the quiet ingenuity of ancestors. They saw a soft plateau. And they saw a sanctuary. They faced threats on the horizon, and they built a world beneath their feet. It makes you think in our own time with different fears, complex fears. What forms do our sanctuaries take? What are we trying so hard to preserve? And where are we building the spaces to keep those things safe? Derinkuyu reminds us. The drive to protect, to outlast, to hope for a future beyond the crisis. That thread is woven deep into the human spirit. This story isn't written on parchment. It's in the living rock, just waiting for us to listen.